All right, am I on? This is Sunday school class on the book of Numbers. So if that's the class you want to be in, this is it. If not, there's lots of doors. Okay. My name is John Henry, and I had somebody ask me, so I guess I'll just tell you, anybody that wants to know. I had surgery on my stomach about 2 months ago, and it was pretty good overall, but I have had some problems. They might have made the cuff they put in too tight, and so tomorrow I'm going back for a scope and a dilation, and so hopefully when I come here next Sunday, I'm going to go, it's great, because right now I'm having a hard time eating, and that's, if you know me, I like to eat. So anyway, you could, if you want to, you can pray about that tomorrow. That will be around 10:30, I think, tomorrow. Okay, this is on the book of Numbers, and the Expositor's Bible Commentary says this: "Who but a mathematician could rise with joy to a book called Numbers?" Well, I have good news for you. I am a mathematician. I worked for 6 years as a mathematician for the Department of Defense, and then I spent 31 years as a mathematics professor, which I'm now retired from. I would like to see, since we're talking about numbers, how much you remember from your math classes. So think back to your last math class. I have a problem here I have a problem here for you. Does anybody need some scrap paper? That's actually a really difficult problem, so don't bother. As we read through Numbers, which is what we're going to be doing in this class, we're actually jumping into the middle of a story. There's a lot of narrative in Numbers, and it's good narrative. So this is the fourth book in the Bible. I want to look back and quickly review the first three books with you: Genesis, Exodus, and Leviticus, because if you got to have a pretty good understanding of this, otherwise this isn't going to make a lot of sense. So we're going to start with Genesis. Of course, Genesis starts with the creation, right? Stephen Hawking was a famous physicist, mathematician who wrote a book in which he claimed that there was no God. And in that book, this is just a quote from the book: "Because there is a law such as gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing." Hawkins didn't like the idea of God because God is pre-eternal, pre-existent. He's always been around. He didn't like that. But what he's done here is he's got the same issue. You could say to him, well, where do the laws come from? Where do the laws of gravity and the other laws of physics come from? He would have to say, well, they're pre-existent and pre-eternal. So he's got really the same issue. And he's got other issues with this statement as well. Gravity works on matter. Well, where did the matter come from? He doesn't have an explanation for that. And so this statement, to me, this bothers me when a physicist will write something like this in a, quote, science book, because there's a lot of foolish people that will read a ridiculous statement like this, and they will conclude that this is science that he's talking about. Is this a scientific statement? There's nothing about this statement that's scientific. It's not testable. It is not observable. There's no part of the scientific method you can apply to this. So this is not science. This is just this man's opinion, and it's a bad opinion. God had a different opinion. God in Genesis 1:1 said, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." So they're basically at odds here. Hawking says the universe created itself, and God says, no, I created the universe. And quite frankly, I choose to believe God if I have to believe one of those two. And so I do. Stephen Hawking died in 2018, and I suppose he now knows that he was wrong. One day he's going to have to stand before the very God that he denied his entire life. and give an account. Genesis chapter, I'm going to call Genesis 1 and 2 the creation. That's the creation account. Genesis chapter 3, what happens in Genesis chapter 3? Yeah, we usually call that the fall. And I could call it the fall, but I'm going to call it corruption. And then if we go to Genesis 6 through 8, what happens in Genesis 6 through 8? Yeah, the flood, but I'm going to call it, you're right, catastrophe. Some of you are catching on. All right, and then in Genesis chapter 11, what's in Genesis 11? No, it's before Abraham. It's the Tower of Babel. Right? I should put that up, Tower of Babel, right? And we'll call that confusion. Oh, very good. This is the confusion of the languages. Somebody should make a vacation Bible school or something out of this, don't you think? They have, yeah. This is. I'm gonna go ahead and give you the rest of this. This is the part that actually is from before Numbers, but the 7 C's of history are creation, corruption, catastrophe, confusion, and then Christ, and then the cross. And the cross there involves not just the cross, but it's the death, burial, resurrection of Jesus Christ. And finally, the 7th C. Consummation, that's right, the 7th C. So there's a nice little summary of the Old and New Testament, all of history right here. This is God's history, it's human history in the 7 C's of history. Okay, now back to, we finished number 4, right? Genesis 11, that was the Tower of Babel. The rest of the book of Genesis is about God choosing one man, and then it's his story and the story of his descendants. That man's name was Abram originally. Yes, Abraham it became. His name was Abram, and God chose him and said, from you I will make a special people. They will be my people. I will give them a special land. He made all kinds of promises to Abram. He said, through you will be the father of many nations, and through your descendants, all the world will be blessed, which was generically true. But it was also specifically true because this was the line that the Messiah, Jesus Christ, was to come from. And God changed his name from Abram to Abraham. Abraham had a son, and his name was Isaac. That's right. And Isaac had 2 sons, Esau and Jacob. And which one got the blessing? It was Jacob. Esau despised his birthright, and but Jacob, quite frankly, wasn't much better than Esau. If you read the kinds of shenanigans that Jacob was up to, Jacob eventually wrestles. Let me put Jacob's name up there. Jacob has 4 wives and 12 children, and he wrestles with God, and God changes his name, and his name was changed to Israel, right? And that is where the nation of Israel, the Israelites, they're all descendants of Jacob. And this is a list of his 12 sons. He had at least 1 daughter as well, but 12 sons, and then the mothers of them. Reuben was the firstborn, and Benjamin was the final one. The rest of the book of Genesis talks about stories involving these people. In particular, when you get to the end of Genesis, the son that's in this list that's the most important one is probably which one? Joseph. Yeah, Joseph was, I'm not sure I would have wanted to have Joseph as a brother, because he was a little proud of different things, but he was the favored child in the family. He was the firstborn son of Rachel, who was the favored wife. And so his older brothers basically sold him into slavery. And they thought they had rid the world of them, at least themselves and the world, of him. But in fact, God had other plans. It was actually in God's plan. He was taken down to Egypt, and he was a prisoner down there, and all kinds of terrible things happened to him. And then he ended up becoming. He interpreted the dream for Pharaoh, and he told Pharaoh, there's going to be a terrible famine, but if you do this, this, and this, then it will work out really good for you and your dynasty. And so the Pharaoh said, I need a man who can make that happen. How about you, Joseph? And so he put Joseph in command of everything in the kingdom, except for, he was number one and Joseph was number two. And so when you leave Genesis, actually things are pretty good for the descendants of Israel, the descendants of Jacob. There's about 70 of them that travel down to Egypt because there's a famine throughout the world, and they live pretty good down there. They have all the food they want. They have the good pasture land. They're all shepherds, and things are pretty good. Well, it doesn't take very long for things to go south, and that happens in the book of Exodus. If you move to Exodus, chapter 1, verse 8, it says this: "Now a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph." And probably, we don't actually know what dynasties this was, but probably a new dynasty had taken over. And so when, the old dynasty, they were sort of indebted to Joseph. They liked Joseph and Joseph's family, and he was a part of the establishment. Well, yeah, that's great when that dynasty is around, but as soon as that dynasty is overthrown by a new dynasty, they have no love for the people that were in favor with the old dynasty. And that's probably what happened. In any case, somebody else takes over, and he didn't know Joseph, and the Egyptians began to fear the Israelites. There were a lot of them. They were reproducing like rabbits, apparently, and they said, these people are going to take over if we don't do anything. And so what they did is they enslaved the Israelites. And the Israelites were slaves in Egypt for 430 years. And it was not a happy time for them. It got to the point as the years went on, that they were still reproducing a lot more slaves than the Egyptians probably could handle, and so they decided to have a little bit of population control, and their way of controlling the Israelite population was just to kill all the male children that were born. When you move to Exodus chapter, I get the right chapter here. Exodus chapter 2, a man of the tribe of Levi has a son. And they've been told, they have to kill their male children. He doesn't want to kill his male child. His wife hides the boy in some bulrushes along the bank of the Nile. You all know this story, right? Pharaoh's daughter finds the baby. What a lucky coincidence, right? No lucky coincidence. This is an act of God. And Pharaoh's daughter sees the little baby, and she decides she loves this little baby, and she wants this little baby, and she adopts this little baby as her own. In fact, she's the one that gives the baby's name. She names the baby Moses. Now, that little baby grows up as an Egyptian in the Egyptian court. He has everything that a well-bred Egyptian royalty could have. He probably had the best education you could possibly get in the entire world at that time. And but he knows that he is really an Israelite. And one day he sees an Egyptian mistreating an Israelite, one of the slaves, and he looks around and nobody's looking, and he kills the Egyptian. Well, the word gets out, and Moses has to flee for his life. And so he leaves Egypt and he goes up towards the area that we think of today as Israel, the Promised Land. And he's a shepherd there for, we think, about 40 years. And so at this point, Moses is getting to be an old man. He's probably about 80 years old. And God comes to him in a burning bush and speaks to him and says, Moses, I have a plan for you. I want you to go to Egypt, and you're going to talk to Pharaoh, and you're going to convince him to let my people go. And Moses says, what does he say? He says, find somebody else. He said, I'm not a good speaker. He said, you need somebody who's a good speaker, good talker, good convincer, good debater, and that's not me. And God says, all right, well, you can take Aaron with you. Interesting to me, from that point on, who does all the talking? Moses, yeah, the one who's not the good speaker, right? He grew into the role pretty quickly, right? But apparently he was there with God's strength and he did the job. So he goes down Moses goes down to meet with Pharaoh. Now, he's probably knows Pharaoh. It's possible the conjecture is it might be a stepbrother or something, or it's a relative of his. So he knows this guy. You and I walk in and start talking to Pharaoh, and he doesn't like what we have to say. What happens? We're dead in an instant, right? But Pharaoh's got, he can still pull some of his family ties from years before. And so he goes in and he says, hey, God sent me here and he wants you to let the people go. And Pharaoh says, nice try. And so God proceeds to convince Pharaoh that he wants to let the people go. And I'll just put some things up here, but you know about all the different plagues and things that come upon the land, right? And each time Pharaoh sort of gives in and says, okay, you can go, until the plague is taken away. And then he reneges and says, I didn't really mean it. You can't go anywhere. And so finally, God says, well, this time we'll really get his attention. He sent the angel of death throughout the land of Egypt. And the angel of death killed the firstborn male child in every household in the entire land of Egypt, and including all the animals as well. Whatever the firstborn male was, died, even in Pharaoh's house. But it didn't happen to the Israelites because they marked their doors, and the angel of death passed over those houses. And today that is celebrated as the Passover. Yes, okay, so that's the Passover. And they just celebrated that recently. So when all the children died or not all, but the firstborn male children died in the land of Egypt, Pharaoh said, I've had enough. Take the people and get out of here. You've ruined the land. And so Moses takes the people and they wander off. And it really seems from the text that they just kind of wandered kind of aimlessly towards the sea. And so Pharaoh's watching this. He's probably got spies watching this. He goes, they don't know what they're doing. They don't know where they're going. They're just wandering. They're trapped by the sea. And at this point, Pharaoh one more time reneges on his offer to let him go. And he says, I'm going to send the army and we're going to take care of them. And so he sends his army, and the Israelites are trapped by the sea. And God splits the water of the Red Sea, and they walk across on dry land. And the Egyptians go, well, if they can do it, we can do it too. That's not necessarily a good rule to follow, because they couldn't do it. They got into the middle of the sea, and the sea collapsed back down on them, and they all drowned. So the Israelites escaped from Egypt. Now, this is all in Exodus, and when they get out of Egypt, they wander a little bit in the peninsula there, and they have in the Sinai, and they end up at Mount Sinai. And Moses goes up on top of the mountain, and there's lightning and thunder and all kinds of other things going on. And he's up there for quite a bit of time, and God gives him the law, right? The 10 Commandments, but the whole law as well. And while Moses is up on the mountain communing with God and getting the 10 Commandments, what is Aaron doing? He's down in the camp making a golden calf for the people to worship. And if you're thinking, that's nuts, hold on to your pants, because that kind of stuff happens all through the book of Numbers. It's like you can't even believe they're doing this again. You're like, come on. You just saw what happened 2 weeks ago, and now you're doing this? But they just don't seem to learn. So that is where Exodus comes to an end. They've been out of Egypt for about a year when Exodus ends. Now, next we come to the book of Leviticus. Is this your favorite book in the Bible? I saw this just recently in the Babylon Bee, and so I thought, okay, I gotta put this in. Oops, gotta put this in here. This is an article in the Babylon Bee. Man, people are gonna love reading this one, said Moses while writing Leviticus. Mount Sinai. Hot off the success of Genesis and Exodus, Moses expresses confidence that everyone will love his follow-up work, Leviticus. Okay. So I have a quote from a noted theologian. He said this: most people reading through the Bible die in Leviticus, are cremated in Numbers, and buried in Deuteronomy. Do you know who that noted theologian was? Gary Gilly. That is right. I had that quote in my Bible from 20 years ago or something. Yeah, okay, that was Gary Gilly. All right, so now we come to Numbers, right? Because the fourth book. I'm going to try hard not to cremate you as we go through the book of Numbers, right? Because Gary said they get cremated in Numbers. Let me ask you this. Do you have a favorite number? 17. Okay. 7, 5. Okay, good. I didn't hear the one that I think is the world's favorite number. That's the number 1. You ever been to I have been to a basketball game. You ever been to a basketball game where they're chanting, "We're number 1, we're number 1"? Anybody? I've never been to a game where they sat in the stands and chanted, "We're number 37, we're number 37." Who would do that, right? And then this is another quote I've heard. This is pretty common. "I have to look out for number 1." I'm sure you've all heard that. When somebody says that, who are they talking about? I got to look out for number 1. They're talking about themselves, right? So that is a very popular number. And actually, what does that have to do with numbers? I don't know. This might have been the favorite number of the Israelites. As you see them, they're pretty much looking out for number 1 themselves. I don't know that I have a favorite number. I do have a favorite formula. And I was going to show it, but it doesn't really fit. So if you want to know what it is, you can come and talk to me later. Okay. Let's actually look at Numbers chapter 1. This is Numbers chapter 1, verse 1. "The Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting on the first day of the second month in the second year after they had come out of the land of Egypt, saying." So they are, I'll get to what he says in just a second, okay? But I wanted to talk about this for a second. They've been out of Egypt for about a year now, and they've gotten the law, and now they're going to prepare and get ready to enter the promised land that they've been promised to go into. And Moses is in here. He's in the tent of meeting, and God speaks to him. Now, how did God speak to him? When you read that in the Old Testament, do you wonder? Because there's lots of places in the Old Testament where it says God spoke to this prophet or God spoke to this person and God said this. Well, how did God say that? You know, and it's not clear to me that it's always the same way. There's times in Scripture when it looks like God gave visions. There's times in Scripture when God gave dreams. We know that certainly in the New Testament. Maybe God spoke with an audible voice. But most of the time, we just don't know. We just take the prophet's word for it that God let them know what they needed to know, and then they gave the message from God to the people. In this case, I think we do know how God spoke to Moses. I think we do. Because if I jump forward a couple chapters in Numbers to number 7, verse 89, who knew there were 89 verses in one of the... I didn't know that. "Now when Moses went into the tent of meeting to speak with him," that's Jehovah God is the him, "he heard the voice speaking to him from above the mercy seat that was on the ark of the testimony from between the 2 cherubim, so he spoke to him." So at least in chapter 7, which seems like it was the normal way in which God conversed with Moses, he went into the tent of meeting and he heard an audible voice that was above the mercy seat. He didn't have to question who it was coming from. It wasn't the Wizard of Oz or something. It was God, and he knew it was God, and it was an audible voice. He didn't see God. He just heard God's voice coming from above the mercy seat. So that looks like that was how God was communicating him. Now, what did God have to say to Moses in Numbers chapter 1? This is what it says. "Take a census of all the congregation of the people of Israel by clans, by fathers' houses, according to the number of names, every male, head by head, from 20 years old and upward, all of Israel who are able to go to war. You and Aaron shall list them company by company." So the book of Numbers is called the book of Numbers because in it the people were numbered. Yeah, there was a census. In fact, there was multiple censuses. What's the plural of census? Censi. multiple sensi. I just made up a word there. Well, whatever the plural is, there was more than one that took place in the book of Numbers, and that's why it's referred to as Numbers. So this is the very first one that they're commanded to take, and so we're going to call this census number 1. It was to be a census of males, 20 years old and upward, and they had to be able to go to war. So if they were infirm or if they were too old, then they wouldn't be included in the group as well. But this is who was going to be counted in the census. So here is the results. This is in chapter 1 of Numbers, and I'll just show you the result. So the tribes are mentioned, and Reuben, Simeon, Gad, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Ephraim, Manasseh, Benjamin, Dan, Asher, Naphtali. And there's the numbers. And then the total, 603,550. Do you have any observations about this at all? Okay, Levi is not mentioned here. That's very good. And that is specifically because in Numbers chapter 1, I think it's verse 47, but specifically God says, do not number the Levites, the descendants of Levi. So they were commanded, they don't get counted. Everybody else you count. So Levi's not listed there. Anything else? They're what? Numbers are really clean. That's good observation. Yeah, they are clean. All the numbers end in 50 or 00. I would say all the numbers are rounded to the nearest 50. Okay, but is it possible that these were the actual number of people? And it's possible, but the probability is so minute. It's only one chance in 50 that any one of these tribes would end in a 00 or a 50. And then you got to have 12 of them, and it's that to the 12th power, and that's just highly unlikely. But it could be. In any case, these numbers were wrong like probably the next day, because somebody died or somebody turned from 19 to 20 or so. But this is the general idea. Anything else about those numbers? Joseph's not there. Where's Joseph? Okay, Joseph has 2 children, Ephraim and Manasseh, and they're both up there. So Joseph doesn't become one tribe, Joseph becomes 2 tribes in Israel. And that makes up for Levi not being included here. So there are 12 in the list. Very good. What's the biggest tribe? Judah. And that is perennially the true throughout history. Judah is the biggest tribe of Israel and the most important tribe, and the most important person that ever came through the lineage of Abraham was the Lion of the tribe of Judah, Jesus Christ. Okay, so those are just some observations from this list. Now, there's 603,000. Does that blow your mind? Think about that. They're in a wilderness. There's 603,000 men between the ages of 20 and up. How many people are there here? Yeah, I heard 2 million, and that's probably a very good, accurate estimate. You've got men that are not listed here. You got any boys that are under the age of 20. You got any older men. You're probably talking 1 million men, probably talking about 1 million women, 2 million people. 2 million people in a wilderness. It's a good thing they were getting manna, because there wasn't any food for 2 million people to be eaten. They also had, besides 2 million people, what else did they have with them? Animals, yeah. Back in Exodus, it says this. This is actually Pharaoh talking at the beginning here. Take your flocks and your herds as you have said, and go, and bless me also. And then jump a couple verses later. A mixed multitude also went up with them, along with flocks and herds, a very large number of livestock. So here you have perhaps, and it's an estimate, but 2 million people, and maybe that number of animals as well, somewhere in that ballpark. So this is a massively big group of people that is out in the middle of the wilderness. Okay. if I compare, let me put a list up here. This is the, on the left is the birth order of the 12 sons of Jacob, Israel. And then on the right is the list of the tribes in terms of the census. Is there any observations you can make from that? Some of the observations you've already made. Like you already observed Levi is in the list on the left. He's not on the list on the right. Joseph's on the list on the left. Joseph is not on the right, but Ephraim and Manasseh were on the right. Is there anything you can gather from the order? On the left, it's the birth order. What about the right? People puzzle over this kind of thing. It seems to be a combination of the birth order on the right, along with how important the mother was, because some mothers were more important. Some of the mothers were were wives, and some of them were wives' servants that became wives of Jacob as well. So it seems to be that. But the one thing nobody can figure out is on the right-hand list, why is Gad number 3? Nobody has it. Everybody goes, oh, that's weird, because Gad is not important. And yet there Gad is way up at the top. I don't have an answer for that. Okay. Throughout history, and there may be some people here in the room, so I won't look around, people have resisted the census. They just don't like the census. Can you think of reasons why people maybe don't like the census?
The questions they ask them.
Yeah, personal information I don't really want to give. Okay? Don't trust the government. Okay? Taxes, good. Okay. They're all good answers, but historically, census, whatever that is, word for plural of that, it's associated with taxing. A king would, I have to know how many people are under my jurisdiction so I can know, because I know how much money I want to get in taxes, and I can just do a simple division, and I'll know how much each one should give me. A little bit of math there, right? So, I mean, it's associated with taxing. In fact, think about when Jesus was born. Jesus should have been born in Nazareth. His folks were from Nazareth. They lived in Nazareth. Why was he born in Bethlehem? Because God said so, yeah. Exactly right. Okay, next. No, and that's true. But humanly speaking, the reason was because Augustus Caesar said everybody has to return to their hometown because I got to know how many people there are so I know how many people, so I know how to do the taxing. And so it's always been associated with taxes. People don't like it. There's another reason why some people don't like the census. What happened? Do you remember a little story in Samuel? I think it was 2 Samuel 24. Somebody decided to do a census. David. Yeah, how did that work out? Oh, it didn't work well. David said, you know what, let's have a census. And all of his advisors went, no, don't do it. May God increase the people even more, but don't do the census. And David said, no, we're going to do a census. So they did the census, and God sent a pestilence upon the land, and 70,000 people died. So you put that together with taxes, and anybody, years later, people are still going, don't like the census. I don't know if I can blame them. All right, it turns out for Israel, at least, this is true, and I can't say this for anybody else, but I'm saying this for Israel. A census was only a good idea for Israel when it was God's idea. If it was anybody else's idea, it was not a good idea, okay? All right, chapter 2. I just wanted to get a little bit into Numbers today because chapter 2 is interesting. And it seems like it's like completely divorced from chapter 1, but there's a tie here that connects actually, I think, if you think about it. So in Exodus, chapter 33, verse 7, it says this. Now Moses used to take the tent and pitch it. This is it says later, so I'll just read it. He used to take the tent and pitch it outside the camp, a good distance from the camp, and he called it the tent of meeting. And everyone who sought the Lord would go out to the tent of meeting, which was outside the camp. So God instructed Moses on the law, but he also told him to make a big tent. And it's referred to as the tabernacle or the tent of meeting. And so they made this tent. And it says here in Exodus that Moses put it outside the camp. It implies that it's Moses' idea to put it there. Now, maybe God told him, but if he did, we don't know that. But this is what he did. Now, it may be that he just did it that way because the people were terrified of God, right? What happened when they were at Mount Sinai? Thunder, lightning, right? That was terrifying. And so they're like, if God's going to be in a box, put the box over there. So anyway, they put the tent of meeting outside the camp, and then if you had a question, you needed to consult with God about something, you would go outside the camp to the tent of meeting. Now we come to Numbers chapter 2, and there is an interesting story. God instructs Moses that you are going to change the way you do things. And in particular, you're going to change the way you camp, the way you set up the camp, and you're going to change the way you travel from one location to another. So this is the setup, and I'm summarizing all of chapter 2 here. He said, first of all, the tent of meeting is going to be in the very center of the camp. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, you're going to camp around the tent of meeting. You're going to surround it completely. And you're not going to just camp wherever you want. I mean, up to this point, you're basically talking about an unorganized mob of people, maybe 2 million people and their animals. And God's bringing a little organization into this whole thing, any logistics people here? God's bringing a little logistics into this whole thing. And this is what he says. He says, okay, on the east, you're going to have Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. They're going to camp according to their tribes. And they're going to camp facing the tent of meeting. And then to the south, you're going to have Reuben, Simeon, and Gad. They're going to be facing to the north. And then on the west, you're going to have Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin. And then to the north, you're going to have Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. And notice again that Manasseh and Ephraim, Joseph is listed twice, and Levi is not there. And we'll talk about why later on. But this is the tribes, and this is the way they were going to camp. So much more organized fashion. Also, when they were to go travel, so every once in a while, God would just, you remember the cloud by, was the cloud by day and the fiery pillar by night, and they would follow it. If it moved, they moved, right? Well, think about that. All of a sudden the cloud starts moving. It's like, oh, we got to move 2 million people. That's not going to happen overnight, right? It's going to it better be organized. And so this is how they would go. The first, when the cloud or the pillar would move, the first group that would move, that would peel out, that would leave camp was the tribe of Judah. And then it would be the tribe of Issachar. And then it would be the tribe of Zebulun. And then it would be the tribe of Reuben, and then Simeon, and then Gad. And then the tent of meeting, right in the middle. And then Ephraim, and then Manasseh, and then Benjamin, and then Dan, and then Asher, and Naphtali. I always feel bad for Naphtali. I mean, they might be going, yeah, we're taking up the rear guard, and that might be cool. But after a while, it'd be like, got 1.8 million people walking down the road in front of you, dusty road in front of you. You couldn't even see. Don't forget the animals. There's booby traps every 3 steps. It's like, I really did feel for I want to be in Judah. They're out front. So a little bit of logistics going on here, but 2 million people is approximately the size of the city of Houston. So think about moving everybody in the city of Houston. And it's not, if you want to talk to somebody that will make that real to you, you can talk to Wilman Dave Heineman. about 20 years ago. They were in Houston. They left us for a while. They saw the light and came back. But they went to Houston, and they were there, and a hurricane came. Which one was it? It was Rita. And so they were told to evacuate, and so they and 1.9 million of their best friends got on the interstate. And they went, let me see if I got this right. You went 90 miles in a car in 14 hours. So they were like 6.5 miles an hour, which if you're on a camel is pretty good, but they're in a car. So that's the logistics problem you have when you're trying to move this many people in an orderly fashion. And so again, God is giving them some organization, and that's good. But I think there's a second reason that God did this. And I think it has to do with the location of the tent of meeting. Right? Where did God put Moses put the tent of meeting where? Over there, outside the camp. Where did God put it? The very center. The very center. God demanded in the Old Testament and in the New Testament that he be the center of everything. Remember how Jesus summed up the commandments? He summed up the whole Old Testament with what? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. And that is the sum of what God expects of his people. And that's an Old Testament principle, and that's a New Testament principle as well. So we're going to stop there today. But next week, we'll start somewhere around Numbers chapter 3. Okay? Thank you.